Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you all to day 5 of our special program here on Humanity Rising with hundreds of partnering organizations from around the world, scores of live streaming partners, including in Spanish from time to time for this special program as the governments of the world and major financial institutions, corporations, scientific bodies, and climate activists have been meeting since this last Monday in Glasgow, and will continue to do so until Friday, the 12th of November. And each day on Humanity Rising, we're having a special broadcast where we each day have a different theme that we're taking up. Today will be on the theme of the Earth Charter, and how the peoples of the worlds and the governments of the worlds and civil society and institutions around the world can come together in a charter that honors the sanctity of the earth, and how humanity at this critical moment, if it would merely remember our original alignment in the spirit of biomimicry, could solve virtually all the problems that now plague us, and because we're not paying attention, are spinning out of control. So that's our theme for today. As we have over the last 5 days, we'll be hearing from people in Glasgow who've been there inside the conference and outside the conference as specialists, but also as civil society, as the attention of the world is focused on that city at this critical time, where all of us know that we're in code red for humanity. As the Secretary General of the United Nations has put it, we're now in the tipping point. And yet the solutions that we need to extricate ourselves from our predicament are lying all around. And it's our inability, and in the cases of our government's refusal, to engage in these solutions that constitutes the major part of our predicament. So that's our program today. But let us start, as we always do, in the tumult of our modernity. Just take a minute to pause, reconnect with your body, attune yourself with your heart. And for the next minute or so, just listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that you're alive. We're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey. Oh, dear.
Regeneration.
Thank you, everyone. And now with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude and love for each and every one of you, wherever you are in the world, who are joining our session today. I want to begin by just noting that we're also live tweeting on Twitter each day, and Shelley Alcorn, our Chief Operating Officer, is providing that service for us. So we're also going out through that medium. We're going to be broadcasting also on LinkedIn over the next couple of days. So we're trying as best we can with all the partnerships that have come in through Humanity Rising and our Masters in Regenerative Action, and now the Global Regeneration Corps, to include as many people as we can in the most important conversation in the world right now. And that is how the human race can come together in such a way and in such a spirit that we collaborate in an unprecedented manner to deal with the climate crisis in which we find ourselves, which is about ready to take us out if we're not focused on remembering our natural alignment with our very precious earth. I want to now turn it over to Leslie Southwick Trask, who's the Chief Development Officer of Ubiquity University and has been the coordinator of the emergence of the Global Regeneration Corps. You can get to that link. We'll put it in the chat box to globalregenerationcorps.org. So we want to invite everyone to participate because, as Ed Mueller, who's going to be chairing our session today, has said from the beginning of Humanity Rising, we've moved past the time when sustainability is sufficient to solve our problems. We need now to regenerate, to proactively regenerate the human and planetary ecosystems. And so it was in that spirit that we've been establishing the Global Regeneration Corps, not as a new organization, but as a global call to action for organizations and individuals to come together and form a global network of regeneration across the disciplines and across the challenges that we face. So Leslie, I want to welcome you and thank you for everything that you've done to bring all this to pass. And Leslie will say a few words on the GRC and then turn it over to Ed.
Thank you so much, Jim. And I think that, as you said in those words, that, through the heart, we actually enter this space. And then we start to move with our voice and our ears in how we interact around the issues facing us. So I just want to say, for all of you who are sitting there and saying, I don't know how to join the GRC and the Hive, well, right above me is a QR code. And you can, if you're watching this on your computer, you can literally pick up your phone, put it on camera, and zero in on that code. It will say open in whatever browser you use. You click on that and voila, you will be inside the Hive. And why would you want to be inside the Hive? Well, it's a social experiment. We say that we know that there are millions around the world who are coming together to create a different world, a world outside of COP26, a movement that is bigger than we can possibly imagine. We think intuitively that that's correct, but how would we know? Well, the Hive is one of our ways of finding out, to see who is out there who is saying, I have a voice around regeneration. I have a voice around making a difference in this world that will leave this to the children and the grandchildren of those yet to come. This is your way of saying, I have a voice. So click on the QR code and create your Hive. Now, I'm going to show you another way of doing this, which is coming in through the site that Jim just mentioned. And this is our site for the Global Regeneration Core, where the call is truly one of code red. It is an emergency call. This is when we join the hive, we're saying, I'm a first responder who wants to address as best I can as a first responder around code red. The site will take you through our mission and our purposes. And then it says, do you want to take action? Well, I do want to take action. I don't know how I want to take action. I'm part of so many actions. Which one do I choose? Well, the hive is designed to help you figure that out. So when we go down on that page, you can see that you can donate to the cause. You can join as an individual, which will put you into our database. And I say our collective, the global commons. I think this is one of the misnomers that the GRC is an organization. It is not, it's a global commons. So if you want to enter into the global commons as an individual or as an organization, you would click on one of these respective places. If you want to join the conversation, that will take you into the Ubiverse, where we're posting and where you'll see a library of information and posts and links to other Humanity Rising sessions that are related to our global call for action. If you want to join the hive, you would just click on that and it would take you into the app. Now, this happens to be my hive. I've already created it. So every time I want to change an answer or just remember what I said, well, I can go in and I can change whatever I see in here by either deleting an answer I've given or adding more answers. You know, this is live. I might feel today that my issue really is about waste and how are we dealing with waste? Well, that would be something I would add and I would put in and simply say, I'm concerned about waste management. And then I would click OK. And then that one becomes another of my answers that I'm saying to me. Most importantly to me, because when I was completing my hive, I had to think clearly about what is important to me? What are the challenges that mean the most to me? So it's an interesting moment of reflection as we write these answers in terms of what is happening in myself, in my inner ecosystem that is wanting to be said. I can go in, as I said, anytime and change any aspect of my hive so that I can continue to be live with myself as a regenerator. The second screen is here in terms of where am I connected to others? So I can just look at me and I as a mentor, this is my visual of me as a mentor and as I want to join a pod. These are where I see my powers about abundant mindset, feminine intelligence, speaking truth, and transformational intervention. That's me in this moment saying, this is how I'm reaching out into the world in terms of these fractals that are important to me. And coming on next Monday, hopefully sooner, but Monday for sure, you will start to then see in this second screen all of the other people that have a first level connection with you around these orange marks. So who else out there is seeing as their power the feminine intelligence? I want to know because I want to join with them on one of my girl-minded projects, which is girl-driven solutions. So in a flash, I'm going to be able to see who sees themselves with the feminine intelligence power and who sees themselves wanting to be part of a global, of their girl-driven solutions initiative. These are the ways in which we make the invisible, the intuitive. I know there are people out there, but who are they? And we'll see what that looks like coming early next week. And then I get to see, well, how is it evolving, this global regeneration core? And I see on the spinning earth where GRC first responders are showing up. I can stop the globe at any point and click on one of those icons, and I can see who is there that's sitting in India or in Africa or in the United States. that just as the globe spins, I can stop and point. I'm not going to do this in the moment because those are email addresses that are sitting inside the ecosystem of the hive, and I want to respect privacy. But once you're in the hive, you get to click on all of that in order to find out who is doing what, where. And on the second screen, how in connection to you in terms of your most important features of yourself that you want to share with the world. You know, we say that we want to take action, but we can't take action just sitting still. We need to keep our voice going, and we need to see who is with us. And the hive is a global commons of connection to find out. I've sent it to my children. I want them to do it. I'm going to do it with my granddaughter this weekend. I want her to do it. This isn't about just getting all of our favorite in the club, speaking to the converted in the scan. It's about getting all of us who see the earth as needing to be regenerated inside a global conversation. So please join us. Please join all of us that are seeing ourselves as being born at this time for a reason. We are all here for this reason, for changing the earth plateau. And as we do that, we change the lives of our children and their children and their children. So it is with pleasure that I now get to introduce Ed Mueller, a man that I am so fortunate to see on a frequent basis. I covet his background every single time, because his is not a simple photo. His is actual real life. And that and that is what I think is so marvelous, because you are a enormously powerful ecosystem. Ed, the man called Ed, is a powerful, diverse ecosystem who is changing the ecosystem of our planet. And it is with gratitude that I turn it over to you, the president of UCI and a man of great regenerative power. Over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Jim, for organizing this. And thanks, Medium and Anupan, who have willingly joined for this day. I'll hop in very quickly, just with a few slides, just to give you an idea why the Earth Charter is so important to my work and everything I do. And this has been so for over a quarter century. I was lucky enough to be sitting in a room in Rio in 1997, where brilliant people got together and started talking about developing a global charter for all of us. As we've known, as we've seen these days, okay, yes, we're in code red for humanity. And what we haven't seen is that just a month ago, the COP on Biodiversity was held. And as we also know, and it's been published all over the networks, is biodiversity loss is actually going to take us out of this planet way before climate change does. And the UN boss said biodiversity is collapsing, we are the losers. And we look at the COP, and it's not like I had any trust or positive thinking of outcomes of that COP. We've been at this for 29 years, and it's, as Greta says, blah, blah, blah. But what is behind this? Is this a symptom? Is this the cause? Actually, in our educational system from the Western world, the spiritual dimension has been left out, and has been left out way since the Greeks. It was left out because Descartes said that human part is separate than the material part, and that gave us the ability to think we owned nature and we could destroy it or use it the way we wanted to. So in my view of regeneration, in our conceptual framework that we've been working on now for over 10 years, Mother Earth is the basis. So a functioning planet. And this is where we made a mistake on environmental education. We told people we had to take care of the planet. The planet does not need taken care of. It can survive on its own. It's going to kick us out and recover in thousands or millions of years into a new ecosystem. But if we understand that we depend on a functioning planet, then we can change the paradigm. And this has to be done across the board. But we can only do this if that toroid that connects us to that spiritual dimension is strengthened. So it's not about religion. And we're seeing how negative religion can actually be when you mix it with politics. We have the case of Brazil and many, many other countries where this is happening. And we're losing the transparency, we're losing the objectiveness of what we're actually looking at when we're talking about regeneration. So how can we actually bring these ethical aspects, the understanding of our responsibility as humans towards other humans and towards life on the planet? And how do we develop that global empathy? So for me, the spiritual dimension is probably the most important one when I talk about regeneration. And we need to really, really, really see how we can move this forward. And since 21 years ago, we've had an instrument that has inspired me and has actually given me the tools I need to manage this spiritual dimension and to explain it. And it's 4 principles. And I'm not going to cover what Medium is going to say about the Earth Charter. She knows it a lot better than I do. But the respect and care for the community of life is the first principle. And that has to be the basis of any regeneration. Mother Nature needs to be functioning. It needs to be intact. It showed us in the last year when we gave it a few months vacation that it was able to clean up the air, and people in Beijing and New Delhi were able to see the mountains for the first time in decades. That is linked to ecological integrity. There cannot be a healthy community of life without ecological integrity. Even our human life is in danger because we're losing that ecological integrity. We've lost it in 75% of the land surface on the planet, and the ocean is not better off. Then we have the social and economic justice, which is fundamental and which has been left out of regular economics. So profit-oriented, competition-oriented development has to be, let's say, exchanged for a social and economic justice. And then we have democracy, nonviolence, and peace. So I won't go more into this, but just the first sentence of the Earth Charter, this was over 20 years ago, already told us humanity is in a critical moment of Earth's history. It's not now at COP26. We already knew this a long time ago, and we must choose if we want to keep on living on this planet. And it told us also that the future, yes, there are big challenges, but there's great promise. So this is the positive, hopeful vision that should be in the dialogues of Greta and other people. So it's useless to keep on pointing fingers to see who's to blame if China didn't go to the meeting, Brazil didn't go to the meeting, and I'm not going to do it because you're not doing it. No, no, no. It's this promise that nature is willing to regenerate itself if we give it a chance, and if we help, and if we start behaving in a responsible way. And we must understand that we are a human family on one Earth community and have a common destiny. So this tells us, what is the GRC? We must join together, and we need to really focus on transforming this movement into a global society founded on respect for nature, for justice, for culture, for human rights. And we must declare our responsibility to one another and to the greater community of life. A lot of people think only of humans. And what to say about future generations? 34 years ago, we came out with a definition that we'd give the next generation the same opportunities. They are really mad at us because they know that's not true. And it is our home. And the resilience of the community of life depend on preserving healthy biosphere and the ecological system. So the basis of regenerative development is expressed here. So to finish, we have a choice. Either we come together in a partnership to care for Earth and one another, or we risk destruction of ourselves. And the fundamental changes are required in the values, in the way our institutions are, in the way of universities working. We cannot keep on with a reductionist approach, focus on competition. We need to throw down the walls of the departments and start really tackling complex problems with holistic approaches, totally transdisciplinary, bioregionally based. And we must understand that it's not about having more, it's about being more. So when the last sentence of the Earth Charter just allows us to actually understand what we're looking for, what are our struggles. We need to celebrate life, a joyful celebration of life. And that is missing in the COP. That is missing in a lot of the environmental movements. The joy, the hope that will bring us together and allow us to move forward. So I want to invite my dear friend, Miriam, to tell us a bit more about this beautiful job she's had for over a quarter century. Go ahead, Miriam. Thank you for being here with us. Miriam, by the way, is the executive director. Yes, go ahead, Jim.
If I could just interject, because we've got someone from Glasgow who's been waiting there on the streets, Dita Vizozo. So let's bring her in first, Ed, if I might suggest that, and then we can really focus on Miriam and then Anupam. But Dita, tell us what's happening in Glasgow. Can you hear us? Yeah, we may not be able to connect with her.
Dieter, can you unmute? Probably networks are totally
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Well, I suggest we keep moving, and then Dita.
I hope you can listen to me. It's quite loud.
Dita, may I suggest that you turn off your video and we only do audio for now?
Joining the Fridays future.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everyone. I can have little doubt that the internet circuits from Glasgow are overwhelmed at the moment after everything that's been going on. But Ed, let's just continue. And Miriam, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Miriam, go ahead. And maybe you can say a few words about yourself because I didn't really introduce you.
It's okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Edward and Jim and everyone for putting this together, this space and this effort throughout this week. So I'm Miriam Vilela. I'm based here in Costa Rica. I'm originally from Brasilia, and have been working with this idea of an Earth Charter for about over 25 years. So today our intention is to share with you a little bit about the Earth Charter and how does it fit in the current context where we are. And also our intention is to share with you a new project that we are working on with the Earth Charter. But I want to build on what Edward just said about COP and making a link on the need for spirituality and ethics in the Earth Charter. I think one of the issues that we are confronted with, and I just want to verbalize and to make it visible, is that on one hand, we have to celebrate the fact that a United Nations exists over the past 76 years, and there's many reasons for why it exists. On another hand, we also have to acknowledge the challenge that whenever UN negotiation comes to place, the fact is that countries go in to the negotiation table with a national interest in their heads, right? not with a lens of the interest of the planet, the interest of the common good. So it's quite challenged to look at the planetary challenges that we have, the humanity challenges that we have that are all so interdependent. It's quite a challenge to address that with the lens of national interests, right? And I think that's where I think something that the worldview of the Earth Charter brings into the table is it articulates this vision of Earth community of life that Edward just shared beautifully with us. It invites us to move beyond this notion of our own national interests and look at the interests of the Earth community, and invite us to move, not to move away, but move beyond our anthropocentric worldview of what is interest for us as human, and invite us to look at things through a life-centric, Earth-centric approach, inviting us to look at we are part as a community of life, and with that, this involves a number of ethical responsibility. So in terms of when it comes to climate change and all the challenges of biodiversity, climate change that we have, I think I just want to invite us to think that it's not just a matter of UN policies and treaties. It's not just a matter of addressing it through the lenses of, we could say, technological solutions or scientific solutions, but climate change and the current challenges we live in a planetary world that we have, it's a matter of ethics, and it's a matter of Earth ethics. It's actually at the core. And when we put ethics outside our education system, what we have is we have a global society that is ethically and ecological illiterate, trying to solve problems. So we have basically a predominant global society that is ecologically and ethically illiterate, trying to address a global problem. So therefore, that's where I think it lies a lot of the importance of our discussion today. And I think where the Earth Charter fits in. I'm gonna briefly share a presentation with you. Oops, no, let me just start this again. Oops. Just one second. Okay, there we go. So our intention is to talk or share with you how does the Earth Charter fit in this effort to expand our attention from human and human well-being and maybe economic well-being or economic growth to an attention of planetary well-being. And if we look at the context, the role of indexes over the past 100 years, a number of new instruments emerged in that global society is using in different ways. For instance, GDP didn't exist 100 years ago, but it emerged, and around the 1940s, 1950s, it became a significant reference to look at economic growth of countries. And it has all its flaws, as we know. And then many years later, many other indices and instruments have emerged, such as the Human Development Index, the Happy Planet Index, and many others. And each of these indexes fulfill a particular purpose. And I think, among others, it generates, it sparks attention, and it generates narratives around something. So the role of indexes is that we often measure ourselves according to certain indicators, And by doing that, through that exercise, a new narrative emerged in a number of ways. The fact is there is a significant focus on economic growth on the past 100 years. It's a predominant focus on economic growth in terms of our decisions, the decisions of our countries, and the decisions even within the UN level or UN arena too. And then there was also a shift to focus on the importance of economic well-being. And each one of them are serving as instruments to feed, to cultivate specific worldviews and narratives. And I think it's about time that we question the current indices that we have at hand, right? So we have looked at a number of indices and instruments such as Happy Planet Index, the Living Planet Index, the Global Footprint Instrument, the Human Development Index, and so forth. And they all fulfill a specific purpose, and they all have their value for whatever purpose that they are solving. But the fact is, we do not see really an index that is looking at our ethical responsibility with the planetary well-being. We're not seeing, where we are not having an instrument that helps us to look at, or that helps us really to think about, are we or are we not contributing to planetary well-being? And we think that it's about time that we look at the role these kind of things can play. The instruments, but instruments that help us to look at measurement instruments, but instruments that help us to think, invites us to think of the importance of planetary well-being and what that means in terms of, what does that mean, planetary well-being, to each one of us? If we open the floor to have a discussion about what planetary well-being means, probably many ideas will emerge, and the question could be, how can we measure that? A lot depends on the frame that we are looking at. So if we look at planetary well-being and the importance of planetary well-being, the question is, should we care about planetary well-being, or should we continue to care about the well-being of human beings, or the well-being of economics, or the well-being of our countries or our cultures? But here we are kind of embarking into a process that we want to elevate our concerns and our interests to go beyond our national borders and our cultural borders and think about planetary well-being. In questioning, to question what are our contributions to planetary well-being. And here I'm inviting you to think, how would be our country's decisions, our institutional decisions, and our personal decisions if, before we develop a new policy, before we develop a new project, before we make a decision, we ask ourselves the question, is this new policy, is this decision contributing or not to planetary well-being, and how much it's contributing to planetary well-being? So the question then comes to our minds in terms of, how do we measure planetary well-being? So we are looking at the Earth Charter as an ethical compass. A compass fulfills a particular goal, which gives us a direction or an indication of where we are and which direction we should take. And the question here is taking a direction towards planetary well-being, taking a direction towards a more just, sustainable, regenerative, and peaceful global society, and looking at the Earth Charter as an ethical compass to get us on the right track towards that direction. But briefly, Edward already mentioned about the Earth Charter, but I just want to emphasize that it's organized. Well, first is the result, is the outcomes of a process of a participatory, inclusive, process that involved multicultural, multi-sectoral dialogues and consultations over a number of years in the decade of the 90s. And the result was a document that can be seen as an ethical guide, as an ethical compass, as a reference for decision-making. But basically, it articulates this vision of an Earth ethic in which at the core of it is an ethic of care and respect for the community of life. And the 16 principles are organized in 4 pillars. The first pillar being the foundation of all the other pillars, again, articulates this notion of respect and care for the community of life. The second pillar articulates this whole notion of the importance of ecological integrity, and then social and economic justice. And it ends with a pillar or section on democracy, nonviolence, and peace. The question is, how can we make use of this as an ethical instrument, as a reference for decision-making, for policy-making, but also maybe as an instrument to measure our contributions towards planetary well-being? So,
Miriam, sorry, can I just interrupt
Sure.
a few moments? Rupert is from Glasgow, wanting to give his message, and he really can't wait too long.
Go ahead.
So we can give him the space. Stop sharing. Rupert, go ahead, and then we come back to you, your presentation. Sorry for the interruption.
Thanks, Edward, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak for a minute. I'm sorry to be interrupting a presentation about the Earth Charter, which is so crucial, but I'm sure you can come back to it in just a few minutes. Jim said that he wanted to try to bring me in, and this is the window we've got at the moment. I'm here with Dieter. Hopefully she can join in just a second. So just to give you a quick kind of report as to where things are at. I'm in the middle of Glasgow, and you can probably hear a little bit in the background the speeches coming from the stage. We've had a series of inspiring speeches from a lot of them from Indigenous activists here in the middle of Glasgow. I don't know if you can see the stage in the distance there and hear the applause. It's really good the way that the youth here are trying to ensure that voices from around the world, voices not speaking in English, etc., can be included. And the Fridays for Future March here is pretty big. It's about 25,000 people. I guess my key impression from it is that there is a lot of anger among the young people, and which is completely understandable. I'm worried that if there isn't more done to find ways of responding to that anger adequately, that it won't end prettily in the years ahead, if you see what I mean. I think there's a real sort of sense of generational injustice, among other things, going on here. And so it's been a very inspiring and beautiful march, but there's a real sense of a disconnect with the COP, the official COP, the Blue Zone, just a couple of miles down the road. I guess my hope is that when people see the COP failing next week, as it will, failing to do enough for us, that will be the spur to turn that energy into something which is not just negative, but that is also positive, building a new society, basically, and coping with the horrific damage that we're going to be enduring as a result of being far too little, far too late in this process. So those are my impressions right now. Dieter is here. What do you want to add, Dieter?
Thank you. Yeah, that resonates very much with what I've been hearing and seeing. I've also had amazing conversations with people who are doing stuff that is really independent of what the COP26 is, of the talks, of the plans, but people coming together, people from different faiths, people from different walks of life. And this time is also about connection. So I see how much, like what you were saying, Rupert, about what's going to happen next week. So there's a lot of people looking forward to, okay, we need to solve our community problems. We need to solve the homelessness that is one of the really deep issues of Glasgow and how that connects with climate change. So
Yeah.
there's an awareness of we need to reclaim our agency, and that goes beyond officials, beyond governments, beyond corporations.
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the things which is really impressive about being in Glasgow at the moment, I hadn't anticipated just how much is going on here. There's an incredible amount going on outside the official COP zone, an incredible amount going on among civil society here and spontaneously from the grassroots in Glasgow. And I think that's the kind of symbol or signal of what needs to happen, among other things, in response to the way that the leaders are not stepping up sufficiently, and the way that the COP process is fundamentally broken, in the sense that there is no enforcement mechanism, there is no way in which we can rationally expect this process to deliver something as good as, for example, the Montreal Protocol, which was used quite effectively to deal with ozone destroying gases. We're way off the pace in terms of the COP process. There's no surprise that this process is failing us, given the way it's being constructed. Did that make sense, Edward? Any quick questions or thoughts from
that was
from
amazing, and just reinforces what we've been talking about. I think the outcome of having civil society and the youth say, okay, this is in our hands now, and we quit relying on the UN system, on governments, on corporates to solve it, because they haven't moved in 29 years. And I think that brings us back beautifully to the Earth Charter, because it's an internal process that we have to change inside each of us, and then change our communities, our friends, our families, and make it grow from there. And the index that they're exposing today is exactly that. What is my role in planetary well-being? And this is what each of these politicians that are sitting there with their private jets should be actually asking themselves. What is my role to make the planet a better place for the future? Let's build the future together. We have the solutions. We have everything to go back. We cannot depend on those people that don't want to do it. And they're in power, and they're the ones speaking in the microphones right now.
Yeah, and this is why I'm saying that I think that history is starting to be made here, but it's not being made by the leaders. It's being made by the rest of us. And when there's a more widespread realization that no one is coming to save us, that really that's the starting gun for the kind of thing that Humanity Rising is talking about, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. People know that we have to do it.
Yeah. Folks, we're going to leave you there. Greta Thunberg is coming up here in a minute, but we'll let you get back to the Earth Charter, and we'll get back to the crazy, delightful chaos of Glasgow.
Thank you, Rupert.
Right.
One quick question: is there any porousness between the official blue zone at the COP and what's going on at the streets? Is there any openness on the government side to hearing?
It's a good question.
Absorbing?
It's a really good question. There is not a lot. There are some of us, of course, like me, who are shuttling between the two, but there isn't a great deal of a sense of the blue zone, as it were, inviting the outside in. Greta, for example, has had a sort of minor role or invitation this time, but nothing like what she had a couple of years ago at the Warsaw COP. So and some indigenous people and some indigenous leaders have been have managed to find their way into the COP. It's a complicated system here, but I think it's true to say that the level of porousness is not as great as it should be.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Good luck. Medium, back to you. Isn't that inspiring right at this moment, Medium, what you're talking about, and the need for that global ethics and that global empathy? And that is the Earth Charter. That has been the Earth Charter for me since the beginning. So please go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
No worries. And thank you, Rupert, for sharing with us what's going on there at this moment in Glasgow. And again, I think one of our biggest tasks is to question our assumptions in terms of what a new civilization looks like, and envision that, and envision an ecological, ethical literate new civilization. And it's not just about any ethic. We're talking about an earth ethic that articulates a vision of the importance to care, and the importance to care not only about for my people, for my country, the importance to care not only for humans, but the importance to care, respect, and be ethically responsible for the well-being of the planet and the well-being of the community of life. But for that, it's really, we have to deconstruct a lot of our mindsets, because we're all born in a specific culture, in a specific country, and all the education we have received. I can say it for myself. I was born in Brazil, I grew up in Brazil, and I clearly remember that what I have received was an education about to see the importance of Brazil and how great Brazil is, and to be patriotic and nationalist, right? That's what we normally receive. So therefore, how can we deconstruct that and invite us to amplify and expand our consciousness and our ethical sense of care and responsibility with the large living world, expanding that to the well-being of human beings and the well-being of the large community of life, or the large living world where we are. And I think that's a crucial element, because the fact is, as we can see in COP, countries and national governments go with a hat and with a lens of, I'm going to enter into a negotiation with a lens of national interest. And I think that's certainly a challenge that these international negotiations have. But I think I would just invite us to focus our attention on the fact that not all solutions come from intergovernmental negotiations. So if I may, let me continue here what we wanted to share with you today. So about a year ago, we started looking at the Earth Charter as an ethical compass, as an instrument that could help us actually maybe look at the contributions of countries to planetary well-being. So the idea was to develop this new instrument, an instrument to measure and assess the contributions of countries to planetary well-being, using the criteria based on the ethical framework of the Earth Charter. But if you know the Earth Charter, you'll see that it's quite comprehensive. Actually, I think it's one of the greatest values of the Earth Charter is precisely its integrated and systemic approach, and the uniqueness it has is that it's quite comprehensive, and therefore it has a lot in it. And therefore, a challenge is to see what are the key key indicators that we could identify under each pillar of their charter, rather than going through all the details that is in it, that are sensitive to the contributions that we could offer to planetary well-being. So the idea was to develop this as an instrument to measure, but actually there's an ultimate goal, an overarching goal, that is to change the narrative. It's not just the instrument per se, the index and the measurement instrument, but the ultimate goal of the instrument is not just to measure and assess and rank countries. The ultimate goal is to amplify and maybe even change our narrative to put the focus and attention on planetary well-being. So about a year ago, in September last year, a few of us got together to start envisioning this new instrument. And in September this year, we shared what we called the proof of concept, a sort of a pilot of this index. And we issued it publicly and made an open call for anyone, individuals, institutions, governments, if they want to engage in helping make this project happen. And our vision is that in June next year, we are going to launch the Earth Charter first annual report in index on countries' contributions to planetary well-being. But we are still in a phase of inviting participations, inviting people who are really to jump on this boat and help us to elaborate not only the instrument per se, but to generate or create this new narrative around the importance of planetary well-being and the importance to measure our contributions to planetary well-being through the lenses of the Earth Charter. And as part of this open call, we invited institutions, people, universities, to help us develop country reports or country fact sheets on how much our countries are contributing over the last 30 years to planetary well-being, given the fact that next year will be the 30th anniversary since the Rio 92. We want also to look at that 30 years range of years in terms of how much our countries were able to contribute. But the goal is to be able to issue every year a report and a new version of the index on countries' contributions to planetary well-being. I'm gonna invite Anupan Sarap to join me here while I finish this part. Anupan is, I'm gonna introduce Anupan quickly. He's from India, from Pune, and he moved to Costa Rica a few months ago. He has been involved in this project and taking a lead in developing the Earth Charter new index. And he's gonna share with us a little bit more about this. But before that, I just wanted to close by saying, why did we create, or why are we embarking in this process of creating an Earth Charter new index, or a new index to measure countries' contributions to planetary well-being? First is to expand the focus on human well-being to one of planetary well-being, then to offer countries a practical means to apply the ethical guidelines of the Earth Charter for planetary well-being, to show a new, different angle, a new barometer, one that offers a view of the current status of contributions to planetary well-being. We also created to eventually make this instrument become a reference for countries, as well as an informational tool, a communication, research, and educational tool. Again, many years ago, many of the current instruments that we have didn't exist, but they served a specific purpose. And now we want to use this momentum of where the third decade of this new millennium, we cannot afford not to reorient our civilization to make it be an ecologically and ethically literate civilization. And that's where I think this instrument can play an important role. Anupan, may I invite you to come to the floor and continue to share this instrument?
Anupan, can you give us a few moments? We have another interruption. I'm going to give it to Jim. We have somebody else coming in.
Thank you, Ed and Marian and Anupan. This is the nature of Humanity Rising at the COP. I'd like to introduce Basia Alexander and Jim Conway now, who aren't in Glasgow, but they're in one of the devastated forest fire regions in California. They have an expertise. You all know about horse whisperers and people who can commune with various animals. Well, Jim and Basia commune and communicate and heal trees and forests. And on their own accord, with their own resources, they've traveled from the East Coast of the United States to California. They're now spending about 10 days traveling through the various forest fires in California that, as you all know, have devastated not only this state, but the entire Northwest of the United States up into British Columbia. And they are in the fire region as we speak. And so we thought we would just invite them in for a few minutes just to give their report on what's happening to Mother Earth in the Northwest part of North America. Jim, Basia.
Thank you so much. We appreciate this opportunity. Thanks. we'll be quick because we do need to get back out into the fire area. And you see our photo from yesterday behind us when we just entered the Dixie fire area.
Can they hear us?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Jim Conroy, and we were in the Dixie fire yesterday. It's about 1 million acres burned. Okay, and we're working with the trees and ecosystems to help heal those trees and ecosystems. Ours is a holistic approach. Okay, we don't use any products, anything like that. It's a holistic approach to healing sick trees and plants. We get in touch with the consciousness of the tree. We tap into the consciousness of the tree. Okay, the consciousness is the guiding light in a tree. All right, it's the guiding light for the tree or the ecosystem to reach its goals. All right, we tap into that consciousness. And we work with the intelligence of nature to help that tree or ecosystem develop a path to healing. All right, so we get all the parts in a particular tree. We get the parts, systems, and functions back connected in the tree. All right. It's not really us doing the work. It's we're helping the tree develop this system, all right, to get back to come back to health again. Now, this is all a path to healing. Yeah. Now, you got to understand in the fire areas, you say, okay, those trees are completely burned. Yeah, that's right. But some of them have an opportunity to survive. They're very resilient. They want to grow. All right. So, and that's what we do. It isn't the ones that look green that survive, is the ones that are really brown, and we actually can work with them to help them to grow. And let me show you the path to healing.
I'm going to share.
Boss is going to share a slide.
There. Okay.
Okay,
There.
I hope you all can see this slide. So down in the left-hand corner, number 1, we asked the tree to break down some stored food in the roots. The trees store food in their roots. All right, they got it. They have it there. As they break down that food, we work with them to break down that food, get those reactions going again. All right, and there's an energy release when they break down that food. Well, what's that energy release do? Well, that helps increase the circulation in the tree, the circulation of food and fluids in the tree. Once you get that circulation going, that clears some of the blockages in the tree. Now, you have to understand, in a fire area, those trees weren't necessarily healthy before the fire. Okay, they already have blockages and have all kinds of problems going on for them even before the fire. So we work with them to get that circulation going, to clear those blockages within the tree. Usually somewhere between the roots and the trunk of the tree is usually the main blockages in these trees. All right, so we increase that circulation. What else do we do with the circulation? Well, the circulation can drive food and fluid out to any living tissues in the tree. So let's say, for example, out in the ends of the branches, the tree was putting on some buds. Well, naturally, those buds got burned, but there might still be some cells out there that still haven't completely burned. Well, those cells, we get food and fluid out to those cells, they can begin to multiply again and start to put on new needle or leaf buds again. That's what we're hoping to do. Again, trees are very resilient. They will try to live. Okay, the new buds will grow into needles and leaves. That'll make more food through photosynthesis. Okay, you get those new needles and leaves. The natural photosynthesis process begins. Tree can make more food for itself, and then you start the continuous loop. More food, more circulation, more growth, more food. The tree gradually begins to recover, okay, putting on more and more and more growth, all right? The tree's goals are attained, and that leads to the forest goals being attained at the same time, okay? The trees, you got to understand, the trees are attuned to what the forest goes. There's a consciousness in the forest too, by the way. The consciousness of the forest has goals, okay? And the trees are aligned with the goals of the forest. They have their own individual goals, but they're aligned with the goals of the forest. And guess what? They all work together as one to be healthy trees and a healthy forest. There's a little lesson in here for humans, okay, about all working together in the community. Trees and plants and nature have this all working out. I hear you talking about the Earth Charter. Believe me, nature's got this all worked out. We just have to learn to first connect with nature, communicate with nature, collaborate with nature, and then co-create with nature. That co-creation is the big thing. Humans can have what they need. Okay, we can definitely have what they need, but we don't just do it the human way. We do it by working with nature and asking nature what it needs, work with it, find out what it needs. We help nature get what it wants. They help us get what we want. We all work together as one. That's how the trees work together with the forest. Okay, they all work together as one, so everybody attains their goals. All right, and nobody is harmed in the process. That's what this is all about. This is the path to healing. Now you say, as I said, you know, yeah, a lot of trees are so crispy brown, they'll never come back. But if we can save 50% of those trees, that's pretty good. My first estimate is that about 50% of those trees have an opportunity to live. Okay, that's kind of been there one day in this Dixie fire, million-acre fire. And that's my first estimate. We'll see as we go on, as the days go on, where that estimate comes into. But that's where we're at now. Yeah, but if you can save 50% of those trees, that's really a big help. No mudslides, you know, more trees taking up carbon. All right, all the benefits to having trees in our lives. And so that's kind of how we work it. With that,
Yeah.
Basha, you got anything you want to say?
Yeah, let me slip in here for a moment. Yeah, so in the context of this COP conference, and especially with talking about the Earth Charter today, we feel that people need to understand that climate extremes such as drought or fire compromise trees' inner functionality. And so even though something like planting trees is a good idea, it's a practical thing to do, it needs to be done, it's really more important for people to focus on what trees need in order to grow in a climate-altered environment once they are planted. And it's also really important to keep that old growth, keep the trees that exist and the forests that exist. And we teach people mindful methods to protect trees that way. Most importantly, our message is that ecological damage certainly needs to be addressed in practical ways. But the other half of that is that ecological damage can be healed by using consciousness. And so between the two, between doing both things concurrently, we really have a chance to turn this ecological damage around. We're very hopeful that that people will awaken to see what works, and then they'll just do what works.
And to be clear, look, we're helping that path to healing I described to you, and what we're doing, that's coming from the tree and the intelligence of nature. That's not coming from me. All right, that's not this isn't human stuff. Okay, this is what I think needs to happen. Now, this is coming from the intelligence of nature. Most of the stuff we do is human stuff. We look at a damaged tree like this and say, well, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to add this product, you got to add that product. We don't add any products. We just work with that intelligence of nature, work with the consciousness, tap into the consciousness of those trees, help the tree develop that path to healing so it can become healthy, and then it attains its goals, the forest attains its goals, and they go on and grow and be healthy trees and forests.
Thank you so much, Jim, Bazia, Marian, Ed, Anupam, any quick comments or questions?
We need to tap into Gaia's consciousness and get the maximum power out of nature to help us understand that we need to allow it to flourish.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. The forests, it all operates as one. Gaia's consciousness is just another layer, another hold-on layer of the consciousness that we work with, and that we hope to teach everyone else to work with.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bazia. Thank you, Jim.
Power to you too. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and we'll let you know what else we find in the Dixie
Yeah,
fire
we're going
today.
we're going into, if you've heard of the Greenville area of California burned very bad, we're going in there today.
Yeah,
Okay, and we'll see how we find out.
and we'll let you know how it's going
We'll keep you posted.
in another report tomorrow. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Yep, bye-bye.
Anupan, sorry for delaying but this is energy. This is fuel for our spirits and for the Earth Charter. So go ahead, empowered. We just loaded our batteries to full.
Edward, this was just a fantastic intervention at the right time. So thank you very much, firstly, for the intervention, and secondly, for pointing out how it connects to Gaia. And really gratitude to Jim and Basia for pointing out, and with their example, what respect and care for the greater community of life really means. I think most of us take for granted the presence of a tree as if it's just lifeless. And we see mindless destruction all around in every place that we go on this planet. And it is so gratifying indeed to see that somebody recognizes the healing power of consciousness to even support trees to regenerate and come back. So my deepest gratitude to all the work that Jim and Basia are doing and inspiring us to care for the greater community of life. I think this is a very good point where I can continue from the excellent overview that Miriam gave us about the Earth Charter, its principles, and what we have been trying to do over the last year in terms of coming up with a way whereby we can engage policymakers to try and expand their vision beyond economic growth and beyond human well-being to looking at planetary well-being. I think it's a very important step because I think many of us here, I think almost all of us here have had a planetary focus. And I rather like to think of myself as being one who shares the planet with all of you and with the greater community of life, rather than identify myself with where I was born and with an administrative boundary of a bureaucratic system which says that you shall be part of this country or another country. But unfortunately, the way our civilization has evolved is that we have divided ourselves into boundaries with countries. And these administrative boundaries tend to take decisions about our lives, about the lives of those who we share the planet with, without giving them a voice and without actually enabling them to participate in any democratic process, without being able to actually respect their rights and their contributions that they make to keep this planet habitable and thriving. So it's extremely important that somehow we are able to make sure that we can transition from our way of administering our planet to help them to recognize and see the importance of all the greater community of life. And I think the way one can try and attempt to do that is to use the instruments that they have been using and turn them around in order to help them to recognize and broaden their vision and to see what they can do for ensuring that the planet can remain habitable and thriving. I also want to express my gratitude to Rupert and Deeta for giving us the update of what is happening in Glasgow at COP26, and to point out that still our leaders are very much looking at these administrative boundaries, and we somehow need to pull them away from these administrative boundaries and the bureaucratic processes which drive decision making to looking at a broader picture. I also want to thank Jacob for his excellent comment pointing out that business schools and ethics 101 have really been trying to push the idea of ethics into business. And however, it has kind of been just a compliance and really needs to go beyond saying that, we have an ethical policy, and it has to translate into action. But I think learning from the way in which businesses and governments work, we recognize that what they can measure is what they act on. And I think in some ways, we all tend to do the same, where we act on what we can measure and what we choose to measure. So if we were to really look at the whole idea of maybe looking at the calendar when we are on a project to see what our deadline is, it makes us value simply being punctual. And we tend to say that, okay, it's 100 days before we need to complete something. Now it's 90 days, now it's 50 days. So we start valuing punctuality. If we were to look at the time to the watch, then we start looking at, how long we take to do something, and we start valuing, the discipline that we need to have. So we have been using the instrument of GDP, as Miriam pointed out, in order to look at economic growth. And prior to 1934, before Kuznets actually came up with the instrument of GDP, we really were not that concerned at economic growth. But if you see that after 1944, when the GDP was adopted by most nations, over the last 50 or 60 years, the GDP, global GDP has grown 86-fold. And while it has grown 86-fold, the wealth has been concentrated in just about 2% of the people. So more than 80% of the wealth is concentrated with 2% of the people. And if we see this, despite knowing this, every country keeps on making the argument that we need to still have more economic growth in order to make sure that all the poor will actually have wealth and will have food to eat and will have a better lifestyle. But the reality for the last 60 years has been that the wealth has only been concentrated in the 2% of the world. So there have been many initiatives which have been trying to say that we need to find an alternative to GDP. And there have been many different instruments which have come and are playing an important role to broaden our horizon beyond the economic growth. However, we are still focused on economic growth when we try to search for only alternatives to GDP. When we really need to focus our attention to the planet beyond economic well-being and human well-being, we need to look at something which is much broader. So at the Earth Charter, and I think Miriam explained very well the idea of the Earth Charter pillars. So the Earth Charter pillars have helped to look at the planet. And when actually the values of the Earth Charter pillars are practiced, the four pillars: respect and care for the community of life, ecological integrity, social and economic justice, and democracy, non-violence, and peace, we actually contribute to the well-being of the planet. We actually make sure that the planet can be habitable and thriving for not just human beings, but for all species. It also enables us to ensure that there will be human well-being and economic well-being. Over the last 2 years, we have seen the consequence of the breakdown of planetary well-being. We all have been locked in. We have not been able to ensure either economic well-being or human well-being for many people across the planet, and certainly not for many species. So it's important, therefore, to recognize that if we were somehow to be able to find out if these values are embedded in the actions and policies of different countries, then we will be able to find out how much these countries are contributing to the planetary well-being. And so with that idea in mind, that we really need to find out how these values are being practiced in different countries, we decided to try and create some approach and an instrument, a methodology, which will help us to measure, to score the presence of values, of these values of the 4 pillars of the Earth Charter in the actions and policies of different countries, and to be able to rank them so that they can actually use, or policymakers can actually use these scores to recognize how they have been contributing more, or if their contributions have been eroding over the years in terms of the presence of these values in their decision-making processes and actions across over time. So just as I mentioned that if we were to look at the calendar for when we have a project deadline, we could look at forest area, for instance, in a country. And when we focus our attention on the forest area, we see whether it is dwindling or whether it is expanding. And when the forest area starts expanding, then of course, as a consequence, we are allowing space for other species and practicing the values of respect and care for the community of life, and decreasing the aggression that we have on other species and exercising humility. Similarly, when we focus our attention on decreasing the intensity with which we carry out economic activity, the intensity of GDP in a country. So how much of activity we carry out in a hectare of land or a square kilometer of land, if we decrease this intensity, then we are actually allowing the ecosystem to be intact and allow its ability to regenerate itself and to allow it to maintain an integrity. But if we increase the intensity of our economic activity, then we actually cause ecological destruction, as we have been witnessing across the planet. At the same time, when we start focusing our attention on looking at longevity that is present in any country, then we automatically are concerned about the various ways in which people can live longer, which cannot happen if social and economic justice values are not in practice. And therefore, what we start doing is we start ensuring that we are providing people with the kind of services that they require, whether they be health services, economic services, educational services, gender equality, and all of those values would be provided. Similarly, when we start focusing our attention on looking at refugees, then we ensure that the country would have the ability to provide people with participation, ensure that there is no violence against communities, that we allow them to participate in democratic processes, and there is the values of peace are practiced in the actions. And we ensure that there is inclusion of people, and we end the exclusion of people from the participation processes within the country. So what we did was we said that if we were to therefore use indicators in a very simple way, and if I were to give you an analogy, when we talk about our well-being as human beings, and which we have been doing a lot over the last year. So when we talk about the well-being of human beings, we don't really need to go to a pathologist to do a whole lot of pathology tests, or we don't need to go to a radiologist to get all kinds of x-rays, or we don't need to go to an MRI scan to do a whole lot of scans of magnetic and electrical scans of the body in order to decide on our well-being. But all we need to do is maybe just look at the smile on the person's face, look at the radiance of the person's being and the presence and the energy that the person has, or maybe just look at the pulse of the person. And we know that there is human well-being. And I think over the last 2 years, we have been practicing aiming this little device at people to measure the temperature of a person to declare that they are well and they are not really ill. So I think these simple instruments are what have helped us to recognize the well-being of each other and to also ensure in the last 2 years that we are able to separate people who need to be treated for or examined for possible breakdown of well-being because of COVID or other diseases by simply measuring the temperature. So in a similar way, if we were to ensure that we are able to look at different countries and see whether there is a breakdown of the values of respect and care for the community of life, or ecological integrity, or social and economic justice, or democracy, nonviolence, and peace, we need to have simple indicators which people can actually, everybody, and not experts, and not pathologists and radiologists, and not MRI scans need to tell us, but really every person can actually see and say that, look, I can see that, the forest area is shrinking, and how can you be caring for species and other life forms if we are destroying our forests in our country and we do not give space to other species, and we are occupying all the land on this planet Earth for human activities and economic activities. So we need to provide simple indicators which allow people to actually measure and recognize the presence or absence of these values. So this is something that we have been doing, and as a consequence, what we did was we could actually rank different countries in terms of what kind of scores they have for the presence of these different values. And for each of the Earth Charter pillars, we are able to compute some kind of a score. And if we publish this annually, then it helps us to integrate all that we have been fighting for over the last 50 years for the ecosystem and the planet onto one umbrella, which enables us to help policymakers or to tell policymakers that, look, it's not just about looking at decreasing the carbon in the atmosphere. It's about ensuring that the biodiversity is protected, that we respect the greater community of life, that there are democratic values on our planet, that there is social and economic justice, and that ecological integrity is protected. So, what are we really looking for in this exercise as we go along? As Miriam said, that every year we hope to be publishing the annual report of where different countries are scoring with respect to their contributions to planetary well-being. I think we are looking, and while we present an annual report, we want there to be voices of leadership from all of you across the different regions of the world to broadcast the idea of planetary well-being through the values of the Earth Charter. We want the voices of activists and writers across the planet to build narratives around the Earth Charter Index. And we also want academia, which will expand the narrative of the Earth Charter. And in order to make sure that this entire project can continue, of course, all projects require donations and funding. So I will stop here. And Miriam, if you would like to add anything to what I have said, otherwise, I'm sure there would be a lot of questions that...
I would rather hear comments and questions from anyone. Thank you, Anupam.
Thank you, that was impressive. We open the floor. I don't know if one of the moderators have been following the questions in the chat. Is there anybody who can read through them? Are there any
Oh,
questions?
Kurt raised his hand, and Jim too.
Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead,
so-
Kurt.
Thank you. Yeah, so two things, and I'll be brief. Yeah, I've been following the chat. That's one of the luxuries of being a listener here. And just to mention that a lot of those questions about the straddle between the consciousness angle and the science or technological angle are very well addressed in a book that won a Gold Nautilus Award this year, Our Moment of Choice, Evolutionary Visions and Hope for the Future. I put that in chat. 43 really well-known thought leaders from around the world chimed into that book that Simon and Schuster did. And the chapters are very short, so it's a great read through those straddles. So the other thing I was going to say is that, you know, Rick Clugston, who I had invited on, he also then had to go because he had a meeting about the Roma Sisi Spirituality Sustainability Conference. But we work closely with Rick regarding this emerging thought leader circle at the UN, which is trying to take a really aggressive activist approach, because we actually recognize the Earth Charter as the most robust and rigorous outline that's out there to guide where this could go. And we also understand that one of the reasons that the Earth Charter hasn't gotten traction is because of that pushback from business as usual and the powers that be against something that is that rigorous and that demanding relative to where we actually have to go. So then the last thing I want to say, and I've been posting on this a lot in the last few days, is that up until 2016, we did not have a partner in the mainstream / reductionist scientific community, which was a really zealous partner in where all of us want to go. That happened in 2015 and 16 when evolutionary science redefined natural selection. It was in a book by Yale Templeton called The Foundational Questions of Science. It was piloted by E.O. Wilson at Harvard, David Sloan Wilson at State University of New York, where they added to the old Darwinian model of competition the proofs of multi-level and group selection in nature. And what that means is that multi-level selection and group selection in nature always choose for the good of the whole, and they move toward cooperation and they move toward altruism. So suddenly what happened in the mainstream, very much reductionist community was they realized, oh my God, we aren't just making these horrible decisions in a vacuum of Darwinian competition. We're making these horrible decisions in the context of nature that's really wanting to work toward altruism, partnership, and cooperation through group and multi-level selection. So if you go, and this will be the end of what I'll say, just in the interest of time, if you go to prosocial.world, that's actually the website from Evolution Institute, State University of New York, on that emerging understanding. And suddenly then, so much of the reductionist crowd has been able to get on board with the message we're talking about because of the proof now that evolutionary process itself is going that direction. If you look at that website, you're going to see a peculiar mix between the old reductionist and the new, more holistic. But that's because this bridge is just starting to be built. And it's working vice versa. So I took the head of prosocial.world out to meet Ken Wilber. And the great news for the integral side or spiral dynamics crowd trying to understand this whole emergence process we're going through is that they didn't understand where the mechanism in nature might be for all of the positive things that we see happening. For instance, even the folks that were just on from the tree community, what is it in nature that drives that thing where we understand that consciousness is involved, it's coherent with the heart, and so on and so on. And so what they realized is that what it is, again, is group and multi-level selection in nature actually then choose for these directions in natural process that move toward the altruistic and toward the cooperative. So that has brought a whole new ray of hope into this ongoing discussion, because that's a major ally now in what used to be completely reductionist science. So, you know, I just wanted to bring in those comments, and thanks for the chance to do that.
Thank you, Kurt. Marilyn was asking, how does the Earth Charter Index align with the donut economics? We've been working with donut economics focus for Costa Rica on the downscaling of it. We actually had a few months of joint sessions for the downscaling. And the reason is that we're not finding that practical what Amsterdam did to downscale the donut with the 4 lenses at a country level, especially if we look at nature. And I think this is where I could say these are all complementary instruments, and maybe we can go working together to get a more unified approach, bringing everybody to work together. And one of the things we're doing in the Regenerate Costa Rica initiative is starting to incorporate biomimicry, but not only the technical mechanical biomimicry, like designing paints for hospitals based on shark skin that avoids bacteria to hang on. No, it's actually the functional part of biomimicry. How does nature do it? And learn from nature. This is what the tree whisperers were telling us. And I think if we can build that in, I still see the donut with a lens that's anthropocentric. It's based on the human. It's based on our social development and how we impact the planet with our social development. There, I think Earth Charter's approach to this index of planetary well-being just adds the other side of it. It's that spiritual dimension that is missing on many of the technocratic instruments that we have, like GDP. So I would say they're complementary, and I would say we probably will end up with a mix match of many different things coming together in the future as our global consciousness grows and we bring it in synchronicity with Gaia's consciousness, the Earth consciousness. And that's why that toroid from Mother Earth to the spiritual dimension is what actually allowed me to clarify what I understood what regeneration was. It's not ecosystem restoration, and the decade of ecosystem restoration is not the approach we need. We need to complement it with that dimension that's beyond the technical, mechanistic approaches that we are used to working with in our Western world. But please, Miriam, I pass it on to you or Anupam to give your vision on it.
Anupam?
Yes, I think, Edward, you have covered comprehensively the comment on how does this relate to the donut economics. And I think the phrase donut economics clearly focuses also on economics. And so it's not only anthropocentric, but it is basically an indicator of the economics and the economic viability of a region. So I think they're different focus based on different aspects that you're looking at. What the idea of planetary well-being or contributions to planetary well-being is focusing on is what is the presence of values in actions and policy that can ensure that the planet remains habitable and thriving. I think the donut economics focuses on how can we economically ensure that we can support human activities in a particular region. So we are trying to expand the focus that we have beyond economics and beyond human well-being to the well-being of the planet. And the other thing that we are trying to look at is, can we actually look for the presence of values that we need to have in order to contribute to planetary well-being? Do you want to add to that, Miriam?
No, I think you both articulated pretty well in terms of the linkage and complementarity and difference between the donuts and economics and the Earth Charter Index. I think I would like to answer or to make comments to some of the questions that came to here specifically on the Earth Charter and the Index, which was the theme of today. And there was someone who, I think Kathy from Ireland mentioned it would be nice to have it launched next year, but there was someone who said, Anupan, administrative boundaries. Can you see that comment? I'm just trying to pull some. It was a comment from Kat Haber. Maybe Anupan, would you like to comment on that? It was a comment about administrative boundaries.
I'm trying to pull that up. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's.
Okay, the comment is admin boundaries, pull them beyond and to broader democracy ethics into biz from compliance policy to ethical choices, actions, value discipline needed. GDP in past for economic growth before 1934, we were not that concerned with economic growth. Over the last 60 years, global GDP has grown 86-fold, concentrated wealth in 2% of the people. Still, each country wants more economic growth for poor to have food, shelter, survival. Alternatively, focus on economic growth in Earth Charter pillars, contribute to well-being of Earth and all species. Economic human well-being, GDP, does not lead to the well-being of species, humans, Earth. If these values were embedded in policies of various countries, we could see how they may be practiced in different countries. Measure, score, presence of values for these 4 pillars of the Earth Charter to rank them so they become useful for contributing more in decisions, policies over time. I think it's more a summary of what I was speaking rather than actually a comment or a question. So I think it's largely trying to capture the stream of thoughts that I was communicating. So I don't know if you really want me to add to.
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe I was confused with this comment because I saw focus on economic growth in their charter pillars. And I think I just wanted to clarify that there is no focus on economic growth in Earth Charter pillar.
Yes.
And neither there is no focus on economic growth in the specific project that we came to share with you today, which was an index that is unique in the sense that it has a specific angle on ethics-based decisions and actions of countries through a lens of planetary well-being, which are using, again, the Earth Charter as an instrument, but there's no focus on economic growth in the Earth Charter, neither in this particular instrument. I just wanted to clarify.
I want to add something out of my own experience. I've used the Earth Charter forever in my talks. I usually open up with one of these inspiring sentences. And I remember in several occasions when I was talking, especially with congresses, where there was a non-acceptance of the reality for political reasons. And finally, when I gave enough evidence in my talks of the situation we were in, one or other politician always raised the hand and say, okay, yes, and how do we put this into action? How do we do this? And my telling for them was, when you get up in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror and look at the 16 principles of the Earth Charter and see during your day as you plan it, what are your impacts going to be on these 16 principles? And if they're going to be positive or negative, or if they're going to benefit your wallet and your friends or the planet as a whole. And I think we were probably one of the first universities that adopted the Earth Charter across all our students. And they too, before we start any program, the exercise is with the Earth Charter. And there again, we asked them to choose several principles and just look how their life and their professional work is affecting these principles. And if they're incorporating these principles in their daily thoughts, if they wake up and think on these principles. And I see the index as an expansion for the use of this. But a president could actually open up the Earth Chart every morning and say, okay, my decisions today have to contemplate this. So that's the way I use the Earth Chart, and that's the way I see this index being so powerful, because it's a consciousness process for us and for countries and how we relate to our impacts in this non-economic dimension.
Lupang?
Yeah, so I see some more comments in the chat box. I think it's filling up faster than I can actually read it. So thank you for your comments. I just see the first one from Shannon, which talks about economics of life. I think basically economics, I think we are talking about the values of life, which I think Miriam explained very well. So the Earth Charter is not about economics. It's really about the ethical values that we need to have. And I think Edward also pointed that out extremely well, that it's important to look at all the 4 pillars of the Earth Charter. They are not about economics. They are about ethical values that we need to practice in our policy and actions in order to ensure the well-being of the planet. So thank you, Ed and Miriam, for explaining this very eloquently.
May I bring one question from Rita Marsh? Is there interface Earth Charter and Gross National Happiness Index? Is a single number index developed for 33 indicators categorized under 9 domains. The Gross National Index is constructed based upon a robust multi-dimensional methodology known as the Alkari-Foster method. And I think that Rita is asking, I think there is a relationship or connection, interface between, I don't know if the question is the Earth Charter document, but probably the question is Earth Charter Index and the Gross National Happiness Index.
So I think you want me to respond, or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And the continuous is that the concept of gross national happiness has often been explained by its 4 pillars, good governance, etc., cultural preservation and environmental conservation.
So I think I don't want to go into the methodology of the happiness index. However, I will say that each index creates a methodology based on the purpose that the index or the indicator serves. And one of the simplest examples I can give you of recent times is that we are being subjected to at least half a dozen different kinds of tests in order to see whether we have contracted COVID or not. These different tests serve the purpose of simply saying whether the test was positive or negative, to say that whether you have COVID or you don't have COVID. However, each of these have different levels of complexity in ways of trying to find out if we have COVID. Basically, all of these tests are being used in order to make the critical decision as to whether the concerned person needs to be quarantined or not, whether the person needs to be isolated or not, to be treated or not. So it's important to recognize that there are different ways in which you can measure anything that we want to measure. But it is not so much about the measurement as much as it is about the decision that you make about saying what you need to do if the measurement changes its value. So it's to guide the action that we really need to be able to have some mechanism of measuring. And the easier the way to measure, the easier it will be for people to adopt the instrument and measure it in order to take decisions and action. the more complex and complicated it is, the more difficult it is going to be. And to give you a very simple example, we are now into the 26th COP, and even after meeting for 26 years in a row, our leaders have not been able to reduce global warming by even 0.00001% or 1 degree. And it's basically because there is no easy instrument for all of us to recognize how much we contributed to the rise in temperature of the planet. So if there had been some instrument which was fitted into our cars, into our vehicles, into our airplanes, which told us how much this journey caused us to contribute to global carbon, or since the day we fitted it, or since the way we started using the vehicle, how much carbon we have contributed to, we would probably have had some instrument to react to the fact that we were contributing to global warming. There is currently no measure that we have of how much carbon we contribute to by simply changing our mobile phones, or by simply sending an email to somebody, or by simply consuming something from the supermarket. So in the absence of any way to know our contributions, and an easy way to know our contributions without needing to wait for scientists to measure something by sending out all kinds of sophisticated equipment, we are going to be lost, and we are going to waste not 26 years, but maybe our entire lifetime trying to find out what is the most accurate way to measure carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and whether we did contribute to it, and how much we contributed to it by making a journey from place A to place B. So I think it's important, therefore, to evolve indicators and indices which are simple, which the common man can actually use intuitively and recognize what actions they need to do as a result of knowing whether we are having, whether we are doing the right actions or whether we are not doing the right actions. So that is what I think is an important thing to do.
Thank you. I'll pass the word on to Miriam for a final comment, and then back to you, Anupam, for a final comment, as we have to go closing pretty soon. Miriam, please.
Well, I would like to use my final, so thank you everyone. I would like to use my time for final comments to make a comment on a comment that I just saw on the chat box, and express my appreciation for everybody who joined us today for this session that had a particular purpose, which was to share with you our intention to embark in this project to elevate the importance of planetary well-being and how we can measure contributions to planetary well-being. And the intention was to share with you this project, to invite you if you want to contribute. But I saw a message here on the chat box that I just wanted to bring, was from Ben Roberts that says, I'm sensing in this conversation a tension between the desire for unity and the value of diversity. I think it was an interesting comment. My 2 cents worth, as he says, is that unity is not going to manifest at the level of frameworks, metrics, theories, and change, and that a diversity of those things is a sign of health of this movement of movements. And indeed, I think even the Earth Charter and the Earth Charter Index is part of a movement of social transformation, is part of this paradigm shift that is required of this towards this great transition that I believe should be a transition to a more ecological and ethical civilization that this new century requires and needs. I want to believe in that. And I just wanted to share that the Earth Charter, the worldview that is articulated in the Earth Charter, acknowledges this need of diversity and human oneness, as you mentioned in your comments. It says to move forward, we need to celebrate or recognize our diversity, the beauty of diversity in our cultures, but at the same time recognize the fact that we are one human family and one Earth community, and therefore there's this need to live, or to recognize and harmonize diversity and unity at the same time. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here and joining this session, and for your good comments and contributions. Anupan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Marian. I think you more or less summed up everything. I just want to express my gratitude to all of you for caring for the common planet, our shared home, and for the respect and care for the community of life that you express in your actions every day. I want to particularly recognize the work that you all are doing and the importance of your voice. And I think the final comment, which Marian also touched upon, about the recognition of diversity and the importance of diversity, which makes up the ability for us to be unified towards the common goal, the common purpose of actually protecting our planet and to ensure that it remains habitable and thriving. And our actions and decisions will continue to ensure that it remains habitable and thriving. So just like we are used to looking at, or at least some people are used to looking at the ecological services that we can draw from the planet, I think we need to recognize that we also are responsible to give back ecological services, because we are just another species, like the other species, which give ecological services to keep the planet habitable and thriving. So it's very important to recognize that. And I recognize that your voices of leadership are important in ensuring that we expand our narrative and our focus from human and economic well-being to that of planetary well-being through the values, the ethical values of the Earth Charter. And so I would urge you to use your voice and to spread the idea of the Earth Charter Index and the importance of the Earth Charter Index, and using it in order to ensure the well-being of our planet, and our contributions and our actions and decisions being guided by our values of the Earth Charter. So I would call you to write about it. I would call you to talk about it, and I would call you to help us to expand this narrative much beyond what we have initiated. So thank you very much. My gratitude to all of you. And thank you particularly, Jim and Edward, for giving us the opportunity to talk to all of you and let you know about our initiative.
Thank you both. This has been inspiring, and it's really inspiring for all our joint work in the networks. And go to the Hive and fill it out, and we can start networking even more. I'll pass it back to Jim now. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Anupam and Marian. You can see by all the hearts in the chat box that you've been very warmly received. And what's occurring to me, Leslie and Ed, is how we can very explicitly align the emerging global regeneration core with the Earth Charter, and possibly have the Earth Charter as one of the foundational matrices of what it is that we're seeking to launch. Because what really, if you think about it at its most fundamental, what's being birthed through the Earth Charter is really a new world-centric consciousness. In the midst of ethnocentric consciousness, which is why the COPs keep failing year after year after year, because the countries simply can't get beyond an ethnocentric view of the relationship between themselves and the world. And the heroic impulse of the Earth Charter is to rise above that. You know, and it reminds me, Marian and Anupan, you know, the great lines from Chekhov, that he says it's only drop by drop that we squeeze the slave out of ourselves. You know, and it's really true. You can feel the world right now even on the streets of Glasgow, as we heard earlier in the program, we're drop by drop squeezing the slave mentality of ethnocentricity out of ourselves, which is our greatest challenge to overcome, to embrace the values of a world-centric consciousness, a Gaia-centric consciousness that we know we most essentially are, and we know we have to return to, but we have all kinds of political, economic, and financial impediments that preclude us from doing the most obvious thing in the world. So you've really inspired us at the end of day 5 for the COP program that we have. So I really want to honor it. And I really want to be in touch, Miriam, about how we align the GRC with the Earth Charter. That would be a splendid thing to do. And then tomorrow.
Sorry, Jim, but consider it done.
Great. Let's do it. Let's do it. And then tomorrow, everyone, we're going to look at the issue of climate colonialism. We're going to listen to some of the indigenous peoples of North America, South America, and elsewhere who have kept the faith of a world-centric consciousness against the onslaught of colonialism and ethnocentricity, and have endured. And one of them, Phil Lane of the Lakota tribe in North America, is going to speak about the experience of the Native Americans, but also the formulation of a treaty, a world treaty. And it's occurring to me, Miriam, that might be something that we could connect in with the Earth Charter and bring in many more of the indigenous people from around the world who are engaging together to do that.
This is wonderful. Welcoming.
Hopefully we'll have more reports from Glasgow and Jim and Basia as the COP unfolds. So thank you, everyone. This has been splendid. Ed, you knock it out of the park every time, my friend. I just want to salute Ed Mueller as we close today. He's been such an inspiration to all of us, and with such a level of excellence and passion of the heart that it inspires me each and every time. So thank you, Ed. All right, everyone, we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same station here on Humanity Rising for day 6 of the COP. Bye for now.